Have you ever witnessed someone being told right to their face that they don't belong somewhere, only to watch them prove everyone wrong in the most jaw-dropping way? Today's story revolves around Ebony White, a brilliant entrepreneur and visionary who was cruelly told, "Private jets aren't for you," simply because of her race and background. But within minutes, the entire room realized their grave mistake. Ebony wasn't just another potential passenger, she was the brand new owner of the very jet they tried to deny her. Buckle up for an unforgettable tale of prejudice, perseverance, and poetic justice that will leave you cheering for Ebony's unstoppable spirit. Ebony White was born and raised in a modest neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. Her parents, Regina and Jonathan White, worked tirelessly to provide for their 3 children. Regina was a high school teacher who spent her days inspiring teenagers to dream big, while Jonathan was a city bus driver who navigated the hectic streets with unwavering calm. Even in their economically challenged environment, the White family home bristled with stories of resilience, ambition, and boundless love. From an early age, Ebony was inquisitive. She'd ask her parents questions about everything: why the sky was blue, how buses were built, and the best strategies to solve algebra equations. Regina recognized her daughter's thirst for knowledge and began fostering Ebony's curiosity by challenging her with complex puzzles, advanced reading materials, and creative writing prompts. Jonathan, ever the supportive father, took Ebony on life lessons on wheels, little tours around Chicago on his bus routes, where she witnessed the hustle and bustle of the city, gleaning insights about people from all walks of life. Though they didn't have much money, Ebony's parents always stressed that true wealth lay in education and integrity. They encouraged her to apply for scholarships to the best schools. Sure enough, Ebony was accepted into a prestigious magnet high school where she excelled in business classes and extracurricular activities. Surrounded by well-off classmates, Ebony felt a mixture of awe and determination. Many of these peers came from families that ran corporations or had generational wealth. Ebony, by contrast, had to manage with hand-me-down textbooks and out-of-date computer software. Yet her parents' unwavering support convinced her she could surpass any obstacle. It was in her final year of high school that Ebony had a life-changing experience. Her class was tasked with a project: come up with a product or business idea that solved a real-world problem. While other students pitched food delivery apps or new social media platforms, Ebony noticed a pressing issue in her own backyard: the lack of clean, safe, recreational spaces for inner-city youth. She developed a plan to refurbish abandoned lots and old buildings, turning them into youth centers, complete with sports facilities, libraries, and creative studios. Her pitch was so compelling that she won first place in a citywide innovation contest. That victory lit a fire within Ebony, a dawning realization that she could create meaningful change by blending her creativity, business acumen, and community focus. Offers poured in from top universities, and Ebony ultimately chose Howard University for its historical significance and track record in cultivating Black excellence. At Howard, Ebony flourished. She majored in business administration, formed a close-knit circle of mentors and friends, and interned at various non-profits to gain real-world experience. With each success, her confidence soared. However, Ebony's journey was not without roadblocks. She faced subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, racism within the corporate environments she worked in. She'd witnessed certain supervisors speak condescendingly to the interns of color while praising the simplest tasks done by their non-black peers. More than once, Ebony was passed over for opportunities in favor of someone with fewer credentials but more powerful connections. Each time, it stung. Yet each time, Ebony vowed to work harder, to learn more, and to prove that her value extended beyond any limitations others tried to impose upon her. A turning point came during her junior year of college when Ebony attended a business seminar featuring executives from major companies, including Gulfstream Aerospace. One executive, an older man with decades in the aviation industry, spoke of how certain demographics simply weren't interested in luxury travel markets. Ebony recalled how casually he dismissed entire communities of color, claiming they lacked the disposable income or cultural inclination for private flights or high-end tourism. That brazen assumption ignited a spark in Ebony, a desire to break down these stereotypes from the inside out. She began researching the aviation industry in her free time, devouring information on everything from fractional ownership models like NetJets to major private jet manufacturers like Bombardier and Gulfstream. She subscribed to aviation magazines, pored over shareholder reports, and kept a watchful eye on any news of expansions or acquisitions. Ebony developed a vision. She wanted to revolutionize private aviation by making it more inclusive and sustainable. She dreamt of launching an environmentally conscious charter company that would open the skies to more diverse customers. The idea might have sounded audacious, but Ebony's track record spoke for itself. When she set her mind to something, she usually found a way to make it happen. Upon graduating from Howard, Ebony plunged headfirst into a consulting job at a boutique firm in D.C. The pay was decent, and the experience was invaluable, but Ebony longed for more freedom to pursue her dream. When the time felt right, she took a leap of faith. She left her consulting position and founded a startup she called Skyrise Cirrus, focusing on sustainable aviation services. The early days were brutal. She had to do everything: draft pitch decks, handle social media, meet with potential investors, and even set up chairs for her own networking events. Skeptics questioned her competence, and at times, Ebony questioned herself. But she pushed on, fueled by an unshakable resolve that had been nurtured since childhood. Over time, Ebony's tenacity paid off. She landed a few high-profile partners and slowly but steadily built a reputation for Skyrise Cirrus as a forward-thinking, socially aware brand. Her ambition? Acquire her own line of private jets, or at least secure exclusive management rights to a new fleet, thereby giving her a seat at the table in an industry that had too often excluded people who looked like her. It was against this backdrop, years of hard work, a lifetime of lessons, that Ebony found herself on the cusp of a groundbreaking deal. She had orchestrated a meeting with an investor group willing to fund the acquisition of a gently used Gulfstream G600, one of the crown jewels of private aviation. If the deal closed, Ebony would become the proud owner of a jet, which she intended to use for corporate charters, philanthropic missions, and as a glaring statement that luxury and exclusivity need not be the realm of only the privileged few. All she needed was for the final negotiations to go smoothly. She had a critical meeting scheduled at a small private airport in Northern Virginia to finalize the paperwork. Unfortunately, Ebony could not anticipate the level of disrespect that awaited her upon arrival, or the sweet taste of retribution that would soon follow. The sun shone brilliantly on the tarmac of the small private airfield in Northern Virginia. Executive jets sat idle, like gleaming birds of paradise waiting for their next flight. Ebony stepped out of her rental car, wearing a crisp, tailored navy blue pantsuit, her natural curls pinned into a neat updo. It was a style she chose specifically to blend professionalism with her own personal flair. Clutching a slim briefcase containing crucial documents, Ebony felt a heady mix of excitement and anxiety swirl in her stomach. She'd arrived 20 minutes early for her appointment, hoping to gather her thoughts and maybe catch a glimpse of the Gulfstream G600 she was on the verge of acquiring. Instead, she was greeted by an uncomfortable hush the moment she stepped into the FBO fixed base operator lounge. Staff members milling around the coffee station fell silent, and a receptionist with stiff posture glanced nervously between Ebony and her colleagues. Ebony approached the receptionist's desk. "Hello," she said politely. "My name is Ebony White. I have an appointment with the broker who's handling the sale of a Gulfstream G600. She offered a polite smile, which was not returned. The receptionist's face contorted into an awkward frown. She spoke in a clipped tone. "Are you lost, perhaps? This is the private jet terminal." Her words hovered in the air, laced with condescension. Ebony swallowed hard. She refused to let hostility or prejudice shake her composure, so she repeated calmly, "No, I'm not lost. I'm here for a meeting with Mr. Randall Moore. Could you let him know that Ebony White has arrived, please?" The receptionist reluctantly picked up the phone. Ebony could hear her voice drop to a whisper as she spoke. Moments later, a tall, middle-aged man in a sleek business suit strode out of a back office. He wore a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Ebony recognized him from the email exchanges they'd had. This was Randall Moore, the broker who was supposed to help finalize the transaction of her soon-to-be plane. "Ah, Miss White," he said with an air of surprise, as though he hadn't really expected someone like her to show up. "Right this way." His voice dripped with barely concealed skepticism. Ebony followed him into a small conference room. The walls were decorated with glossy photographs of various aircraft, each boasting modern interiors with plush seating. One image depicted a well-dressed family sipping champagne as they soared above the clouds. Ebony wondered if the marketing team had ever considered featuring more diverse clientele in their promotional materials. Randall motioned for Ebony to sit. She placed her briefcase gently on the table and began taking out the documents related to the purchase. Before she could speak, Randall raised a hand. "Miss White, we're dealing with a Gulfstream G600 here. That's a pretty high-end plane, usually reserved for top executives and celebrities." Ebony nodded, keeping her tone amiable. "I'm aware. That's precisely why I'm interested. My business model requires a jet with its range and capacity." Randall's smile tightened. "Yes, about that. You mentioned you run Skyrise Cirrus, correct?" "I've heard of it, but it's not a major player in the aviation world. Could you clarify how you plan to finance this purchase? Private jets aren't typically accessible to smaller startups." Despite the wave of anger rising in Ebony's chest, she kept her voice even. "My investor consortium has already secured the necessary funds. The final step is to sign the deal and transfer ownership. It should be straightforward." Randall, seemingly unwilling to drop his veneer of doubt, tapped the table with a manicured finger. "Of course, we just need to ensure everything is in order. Gulfstreams are a huge responsibility. Miss White maintenance, crew salaries, hangar fees. It's not a matter of a simple purchase." And he paused as if bracing for Ebony's reaction. "We typically see these jets in the hands of Fortune 500 CEOs or older, more established individuals. If you catch my drift." Ebony took a measured breath. She had encountered this brand of prejudice numerous times before, but it still stung each time, like a fresh cut that never quite healed. "Mr. Moore, I am aware of the costs and responsibilities. I am also aware that private aviation is often stereotyped as a playground for the privileged. My goal is to reshape that narrative while fulfilling my business needs. Shall we proceed?" Randall nodded, albeit grudgingly. He turned to open a file folder stuffed with documents. As they reviewed the next steps, the inspection, the final sale price, the escrow arrangement, Ebony noticed his continued reluctance. She tried to be diplomatic, But Randall's tone made it clear he was unconvinced she belonged here. After about half an hour of stilted conversation, Randall checked his watch. "I suggest we take a short break, Miss White. I'll have the G600 prepped for viewing, and we can continue from there." He gestured toward the lounge. "Help yourself to some refreshments." Ebony left the conference room and quietly made her way toward the lounge. She noticed the receptionist giving her side eye, whispering to a co-worker. But Ebony was used to forging ahead amidst the whispers. She grabbed a glass of water, stood by a large window overlooking the tarmac, and caught her first in-person glimpse of the aircraft she intended to purchase. Its sleek fuselage gleamed under the bright mid-morning sun, and Ebony felt a surge of pride at how far she'd come. Soon, that bird could be hers. A few minutes later, Randall reappeared, beckoning Ebony to follow him outside. As they walked across the tarmac, Randall explained each feature of the Gulfstream G600, the advanced avionics, the refined interior design options, the transatlantic range. Ebony listened intently, occasionally asking pertinent questions. Still, she could sense his disbelief that a young black woman was seriously considering such a high-end jet. Once inside the plane, Ebony ran her hand over the plush leather seats, imagining the possibilities. Business executives collaborating on mid-flight strategies, philanthropic teams flying to disaster zones with supplies, or scholarships she could sponsor through charitable flight programs. Her mind buzzed with ways to utilize the plane beyond the typical corporate or celebrity models. If everything went according to plan, Ebony's ownership would be a statement that the era of private jets aren't for people like you was coming to an end. Yet Ebony could not ignore the tension that crackled in the air. Randall would occasionally glance at his phone as if waiting for an important message that would confirm his suspicions. Ebony tried to push aside her irritation and focus on the practical details. In less than an hour, they'd wrap up the inspection and head back to the conference room to finalize the paperwork. That was when Ebony's phone buzzed with an urgent text from her lead investor, letting her know that all funds were officially transferred and ready. Her heart pounded with anticipation. The moment she'd dreamed of was at her fingertips. As Ebony followed Randall out of the jet, an older couple dressed to the nines approached them. Their posture radiated wealth and entitlement. The man wore a finely tailored suit, and the woman dripped in gold jewelry. Randall's face lit up in a way it never had while speaking with Ebony. "Mr. and Miss S. Harrison, so glad you could make it," Randall exclaimed, shaking their hands vigorously. Ebony gave a polite nod, expecting a brief introduction. Instead, Randall looked at Ebony as if she were an intruder. "Excuse me, Miss White, I need to show the Harrisons around. They might be interested in a Gulfstream as well." That was odd. Ebony thought she had an exclusive appointment to inspect the jet before finalizing the deal. Perhaps the Harrisons were looking at a different plane. But Ebony couldn't ignore the dismissive manner in which Randall ushered her away, nor the patronizing glance Miss S. Harrison cast her way. A small flame of anger flickered within Ebony. She cleared her throat, trying to maintain composure. "Mr. Moore, I thought we agreed to finalize after the inspection. Are we still on schedule to close the deal for the G600? Randall smiled coolly. "Of course, Miss White. Let's just give me a few minutes to show the Harrisons around, then we'll talk." Ebony walked a short distance away to avoid confrontation. From there, she overheard fragments of their conversation. Miss S. Harrison inquired about the plane Ebony had just inspected. She asked if Randall was negotiating with someone else, and Ebony distinctly heard him respond in a lower voice, "It's not a serious buyer. Private jets aren't for everyone, you know." To her shock, Ebony watched as he led the Harrisons up the steps into the exact Gulfstream G600 Ebony was on the verge of purchasing. Anger and humiliation collided in Ebony's chest. It was clear Randall was attempting to undercut her, Or at the very least, he believed Ebony was not a legitimate buyer. A wave of adrenaline coursed through her veins, but she steadied herself. There was no need for a public outburst. She had the funds. She had the legal paperwork. Soon enough, the entire scenario would flip. Taking a deep breath, Ebony retreated to the FBO lounge to wait and to prepare for what she sensed could be a confrontation. She promised herself she wouldn't stoop to anyone else's level of prejudice. She was there for a business transaction, and she was going to see it through, no matter how dismissive or underhanded Randall might be. Little did Randall know, Ebony's final reveal would arrive in less than 10 minutes, forever altering the dynamic in that plush lounge. Ebony tapped her foot quietly on the polished floor, perched on the edge of a sleek leather sofa in the lounge. She couldn't help but notice the stares from staffers and a few passengers waiting for their flights. Perhaps they wondered why a young black woman was sitting in a place typically reserved for affluent travelers. Ebony straightened her shoulders, reminding herself that she had every right to be there. It seemed like an eternity, but in reality, only about 5 minutes passed before Mr. and Mrs. Harrison re-emerged from the plane with Randall in tow. Their laughter echoed across the tarmac, a carefree sound that only exacerbated Ebony's sense of injustice. As they neared the entrance to the lounge, Ebony caught a snippet of Mr. Harrison complimenting the jet's spacious cabin and luxurious details. Randall, Mr. Harrison declared, "This plane is a real gem. We'd like to discuss terms immediately. We don't want to lose out to someone else." Ebony watched Randall's face morph into a look of satisfaction. He was practically glowing with the promise of a potentially larger commission from the Harrisons. "Well, we do have one other interested party," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the lounge. "But as I mentioned, it's likely not a serious buyer. Perhaps we can find a way to expedite things so the plane doesn't fall into the wrong hands." "The wrong hands?" Ebony muttered under her breath. A mix of anger and heartbreak stirred inside her. She had poured her life's work into reaching this moment, only to be dismissed as if she were some curiosity. Worse, Randall was now actively trying to sell the plane to someone else, ignoring her rightful position in the transaction queue. How could she endure this indignity with grace? She mustered her composure and rose from her seat, stepping forward. "Pardon me," she said politely, making eye contact first with Mr. Harrison, then Mrs. Harrison, and finally Randall. "I'm Ebony White, the current prospective buyer for the Gulfstream G600. Mrs. Harrison blinked, surprise flickering across her features. Mr. Harrison, to his credit, gave a stiff nod, as if still trying to process this unexpected information. Randall cleared his throat, obviously flustered at Ebony's bold introduction. "White, I was just showing the plane to the Harrisons." "Yes, I could see that," Ebony replied, her tone measured but firm. "We were scheduled to finalize negotiations, so I'm not certain why you're presenting the same aircraft to them unless you're hoping for a bidding war." She intentionally paused, letting the tension thicken. Randall forced a contrived smile. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Mr. and Miss S. Harrison represent a significant opportunity. However, we can, of course, circle back to your offer if their interest doesn't materialize." Ebony placed her hands on her hips, eyes narrowing. "Mr. Moore, we already have a handshake agreement, and the funds have been transferred to escrow. As far as I'm concerned, we were moments away from signing and concluding the deal." The Harrisons exchanged glances, suddenly looking less jovial and more cautious. "Mrs. Harrison leaned toward Randall, whispering something Ebony couldn't make out, but she guessed it was a question about Ebony's seriousness as a buyer. Randall's response was equally hushed, but Ebony caught the phrase, "It's complicated." Before Ebony could press further, the FBO's lounge door swung open, drawing everyone's attention. A short, bespectacled man in a crisp suit walked in, scanning the faces in the room. Ebony recognized him immediately. Jay Kim, her longtime associate and the legal consultant who had helped arrange the final terms of the deal. Relief washed over Ebony at the sight of a friendly face. "There you are," Jay said, striding quickly to Ebony's side. He offered a brief nod to the others. "Ebony, I've got the updated paperwork. Everything is in order." Randall's posture stiffened. Mr. Harrison raised an eyebrow, and Miss S. Harrison pursed her lips, clearly sensing a development they hadn't anticipated. "Wonderful," Ebony replied with a small smile, making sure her voice carried to the group. "Shall we finalize the transaction now?" She turned to Randall, but his reluctance was palpable. Clearing his throat, he addressed the Harrisons. "Would you excuse us for a moment? I need to speak with Miss White and her associate in private." Miss S. Harrison shrugged non-committally, while Mr. Harrison's eyes darted between Ebony and Randall, as if weighing the potential outcomes. With that, Randall led Ebony and Jay to a more secluded corner of the lounge, near a row of tinted windows that overlooked a smaller hangar. As soon as they were out of earshot of the Harrisons, Randall glared at Ebony. "Miss White, we need to discuss your financing and your experience in maintaining an aircraft of this caliber. This is a major undertaking, and I can't in good conscience." Jay cut him off. "Excuse me, but Ebony's financing is already verified. The funds sit securely in an escrow account as per the letter of intent. We have signed documents confirming the arrangement. There's no reason to stall." Ebony allowed herself a moment to relish the look on Randall's face, a mixture of frustration and disbelief. He exhaled sharply, flipping through papers on a clipboard he carried. "I just want to ensure everything is legitimate," he muttered. "We don't want to see this deal fall through if Miss White's capital is unstable." She bristled at the insinuation. "Is that truly your only concern, Mr. Moore? Because your sudden pivot to showing the same aircraft to another couple suggests otherwise." Randall's eyes flickered with guilt. It's standard practice to explore all potential buyers, especially for a specialized asset like a Gulfstream. It's not standard practice to knowingly sabotage a nearly finalized sale, Jay interjected. "We have the paperwork ready for immediate signature. If you refuse to finalize, it becomes a breach of good faith in negotiation. We can and will pursue legal remedies." The broker's cool demeanor cracked slightly, a hint of panic shining through. "There's no need for legal talk. He let out a resigned sigh. "Fine, we can proceed, but I expect everything to be in perfect order." The tension in the air was palpable, but Ebony maintained her composure. She knew how close she was to victory. As a final courtesy, she said, "I appreciate your understanding, Mr. Moore. Let's finalize this as planned." Randall gave a terse nod and motioned for them to follow him back to the conference room. On the way, the Harrisons intercepted them. "Mr. Harrison asked quietly, "Randall, are we free to discuss an offer for the G600 after you wrap up with these folks?" Randall hesitated, glancing from Ebony to Jay. After a long pause, he finally said, "I'll let you know." The Harrisons gave Ebony a cursory nod, though their eyes lacked warmth, and stepped aside so the group could pass. The corridor leading to the conference room felt longer than before, lit by the glow of overhead fluorescence. Ebony's heart thudded in her chest, her mind running through final details, the wire transfers, the contracts, the immediate plans for announcing Skyrise Cirrus's expansion. She wanted this purchase to be more than just an acquisition. She wanted it to symbolize opportunity, representation, and progress. Once inside the room, Ebony and Jay took seats on one side of the table, while Randall sat on the other. Laptops glimmered to life, documents were spread out, and Ebony handed over the final forms. Each scribble of ink on paper felt momentous, as though she were laying one more brick in the foundation of a new era. For years, Ebony had hustled, studied, networked, and sacrificed. This moment, signing on the dotted line for the ownership of her first private jet, was supposed to be triumphant. She refused to let Randall's bias dull that shine. Randall glanced at each page methodically, line by line, as if searching for some hidden error that might void the contract. But Ebony and Jay had been meticulous. Every requirement was met, every financial backing double confirmed. Finally, Randall reached the last signature page. With one final flick of his pen, Ebony scrawled her name across the line that sealed the deal. Randall followed suit, albeit with reluctant strokes. "It's done," Ebony said quietly, her voice trembling with a cocktail of relief and pride. She climbed mountains to reach this desk. Despite all the prejudice and obstacles, she had prevailed. Randall clicked his pen shut. "Congratulations, Miss White," he said, though the words left a bitter edge in the air. "You are now the proud owner of a Gulfstream G600. The finality of the statement reverberated in the small room. Before Ebony could respond, her phone buzzed with a text confirming the escrow funds had been released. She looked at Randall. "I'd like to see the plane once more, my plane." A flicker of anger or regret crossed Randall's face, but he simply nodded. "Of course. Follow me." The three of them filed out of the conference room, Ebony glowing with quiet exhilaration, Jay wearing a satisfied half-smile, and Randall, whose shoulders sagged under the weight of a lost commission from the Harrisons. They returned to the lounge, where the staff seemed to sense that something momentous had occurred. The receptionist, who had initially been so dismissive, glanced up from her computer, curiosity dancing in her eyes. Stepping onto the tarmac, Ebony felt the crisp air fill her lungs. There stood her newly acquired Gulfstream G600, its sleek lines and powerful engines, an emblem of modern aviation. She couldn't help but marvel at the transformation of this day. Only minutes ago she was being treated like an unwelcome intruder. Now she was officially an aircraft owner, Mr. and Miss S. Harrison was still milling near the plane, along with a handful of onlookers who seemed enthralled by the potential purchase. As Ebony, Jay, and Randall approached, Ebony noticed confusion flicker across the couple's faces. Randall cleared his throat. "Mr. and Miss S. Harrison, I'd like to introduce you to the official owner of this Gulfstream G600, Miss Ebony White." Silence fell like a curtain. Miss S. Harrison's mouth parted slightly, while Mr. Harrison's eyes widened. It was as though they simply could not compute this scenario. Ebony felt a small pang of satisfaction. She offered a polite nod. "Hello again." To his credit, Mr. Harrison managed a forced smile. "Congratulations," he said. "I suppose that means the jet is no longer available?" Ebony nodded, her voice soft but resolute. "Yes, I'm afraid so. It's mine now." A wave of whispers rippled through the small group of bystanders. Some looked impressed, others astonished. A few openly gawked at Ebony, as if re-evaluating all their preconceived notions in real time. The hush that settled over them was almost tangible. Then, in a stark moment of cosmic irony, a young flight attendant arrived and addressed Ebony, "Miss White, congratulations on your purchase. I'm here to assist you if you'd like to board and take a final look inside." At that invitation, Ebony flashed a grateful smile. "Thank you. I'd love that." The attendant led Ebony up the plane's steps, with Jay following close behind. Randall trailed, though he lingered near the entrance, perhaps uncertain if his presence was still welcome. Ebony wasted no time, stepping into the luxurious cabin and inhaling the faint scent of new leather and freshly cleaned carpets. She ran her fingers over the seatbacks, absorbing the reality. This was no longer a dream, it was hers. Jay let out a short laugh. "You did it, Ebony," he said quietly, pride shining in his eyes. "All those times we talked about breaking barriers in aviation, it's here. You're holding the keys." Ebony's chest tightened with emotion. She recalled the naysayers, the humiliations, the quiet moments of doubt, the short-sighted supervisors who once wrote her off. Now, standing in the hush of the cabin, Ebony felt vindicated. "We did it," she corrected, clasping Jay's hand briefly. "Couldn't have gotten here without you." After the flight attendant and the plane's onboard engineer provided a quick overview of the controls and amenities, Ebony made her way back out onto the steps. She saw that the small crowd near the plane had grown. A few curious passers-by, possibly waiting for other flights, had gathered to see who the new owner of the G600 might be. The receptionist from the lounge stood on the periphery, looking both sheepish and intrigued. Ebony paused at the top of the steps, inhaling deeply, and decided to address the crowd in her own gentle way. "Thank you, everyone, for your kind words spoken or unspoken," she began, scanning their faces. "I'm Ebony White, founder of Skyrise Cirrus. I'm delighted to share that we'll be using this G600 for business charters, philanthropic missions, and more. Our goal is to bring more diversity, sustainability, and inclusivity to private aviation." A few scattered claps broke out. She could see that some people in the group were genuinely impressed, while others seemed stunned. The Harrisons remained quiet, exchanging terse glances with Randall, who had by now wandered to the side of the plane. Ebony didn't revel in their discomfort. She simply felt a sense of calm, as though the moral scales had tipped back into balance. When Ebony descended the steps, she was met by the flight attendant and a ground crew member who congratulated her again. She thanked them both, then turned to address Randall directly. "Mr. Moore," she said, not without respect. "Thank you for facilitating this purchase." Randall, looking like he'd swallowed a lemon, gave a reluctant nod. "Of course, Miss White." A sudden memory flashed in Ebony's mind, Randall leaning into the Harrisons and whispering, "Private jets aren't for everyone," the comment that had undercut her so brazenly. And yet, here she was, defying that prejudice. She glanced at her watch. It had been exactly 9 minutes since Randall had walked out of the plane with the Harrisons and left Ebony alone, doubting her prospects. 9 minutes, just enough time for the entire narrative to flip. Feeling the eyes of the crowd upon her, Ebony decided to make a small, meaningful statement. "You know," she said softly, just loud enough for Randall and those nearest to hear, "someone once told me private jets aren't for me. I guess the universe had other plans." A faint, wry smile curved across her lips, and she left it at that. The sweet taste of vindication was more than enough. She didn't need to gloat or throw it back in anyone's face. The reality spoke for itself. Later that afternoon, Ebony found herself in an upscale cafe near the airport. She and Jay had retreated there to decompress after the whirlwind of events at the FBO. Nestled in a cozy corner booth, Ebony sipped chamomile tea, trying to process the flood of emotions coursing through her. Jay scrolled through his phone, occasionally reading bits of congratulatory messages that had started pouring in from the investor consortium and Ebony's supporters. "The news is out," he said with a grin. "They're going nuts over this on social media. Young black woman buys Gulfstream G600. That's a headline you don't see every day." Ebony raised an eyebrow. "I hope it doesn't overshadow the reason behind the purchase. I want the story to be about inclusion and environmental stewardship, not just about me owning a fancy jet." "It'll be a mix," Jay admitted. "But that's not necessarily bad. Your story could inspire others who never thought they had a seat at the table in private aviation." She nodded, remembering the stares, the hushed tones, the prejudice that had been so brazen. Her heart still pounded when she recalled the phrase, "Private jets aren't for everyone." She'd heard similar words in different contexts her entire life, whether it was about her neighborhood, her skin color, or her gender. But each time, Ebony found a way to push through. "You know," Ebony began, setting her teacup down, "I used to think that if I just worked hard enough, if I just achieved enough, people would accept me for who I am." Jay glanced up, his expression curious and gentle. "You've done more than most, Ebony." She offered him a sad smile. "And yet, we still face these hurdles. It's like no matter how many milestones we hit, there's always someone who believes we don't belong. Jay reached across the small table and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. But look at what you did today. You not only belong, you're setting the rules. Ebony exhaled. That's what keeps me going. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the hum of cafe chatter cocooning them. Ebony tapped her phone, wondering if she should post something about the day's events. She felt a yearning to share the victory, but also a responsibility to highlight the bigger message. Finally, she typed out a brief note. Today, Skyrise Cirrus took a big leap forward in bringing diversity and sustainability to private aviation. We're proud to announce that we've acquired our first Gulfstream G600. My hope is that this marks the beginning of a more inclusive sky for everyone. Skyrise Cirrus, hashtag breaking barriers, hashtag new heights. She hit post. Within seconds, the notifications started lighting up her screen. The magnitude of what she'd accomplished was beginning to sink in. Her reflections were cut short when her phone buzzed again. This time, it was her mother, Regina, calling. Ebony felt a wave of warmth wash over her. Her mother had been her first champion, always believing in her potential. She answered excitedly. "Ebony!" Regina's voice crackled with emotion. "I just saw the news. Is it true, baby? You really bought a private jet?" Ebony laughed, tears threatening to well in her eyes. "Yes, Mum, it's official. Papers signed and everything." "My goodness," Regina breathed. "This is beyond anything I could have imagined. Your father would be so proud of you." Ebony swallowed hard, the mention of her late father tugging at her heart. "I hope he's smiling down on us. This was for both of you, Mom. You taught me to never settle for less. Oh, sweetheart, you made all of us proud. Let me know when you're back in town. I want to hear every detail. And Ebony, yeah, Mom, don't forget where you came from, and don't let them change you." Ebony felt her throat tighten. "I won't." "Love you, Mom." She ended the call, her eyes brimming with tears she refused to shed in a public space. Sensing her emotion, Jay slid a napkin toward her without a word. Ebony dabbed at her eyes, grateful for the friend who had stood by her side through thick and thin. "I guess the real work starts now, huh?" Ebony mused, folding the napkin. "One plane is just the beginning." Jay nodded. "Definitely. We'll need to finalize the operational details, securing a home base, scheduling flights, hiring staff. But you've got investors behind you, a supportive community, and the will to make it happen." Ebony caught a glimpse of her reflection in the cafe's window, recalling all the times she'd felt overlooked or dismissed. From the boardrooms where her proposals were met with skepticism to the FBO lounge just this morning. She realized that the harsh judgments she'd faced had only fortified her resolve to push boundaries. "By the way," Jay added, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "did you see Randall's face when you said, 'my plane'? I think I saw steam coming out of his ears." Ebony let out a genuine laugh, the tension in her chest easing. "Yes, that was satisfying," she admitted. "I won't lie, it felt good to watch those biases crumble in real time. That, my friend, is the sweetest karma. He tried to undercut you, and in the end, he sealed the deal for you to become a jet owner." She took another sip of her tea, a contemplative smile on her lips. "You know, there was a part of me that wanted to throw his words back at him in front of everyone, but I realized I didn't need to. Just existing in that space, doing what I did, was enough." They lingered in the cafe, discussing next steps for Skyrise Cirrus. Ebony planned to use part of the jet's flight hours for philanthropic missions, medical supplies, educational outreach, disaster relief. She saw private aviation not merely as a symbol of luxury, but as a potential force for good, bridging gaps that commercial airlines couldn't. And she was determined to bring more people of color, more women, and more voices, into the cockpit, literally and figuratively. Meanwhile, social media continued to explode with reactions. Congratulatory messages flowed in from Ebony's former classmates, mentors, and business contacts. Some offered partnership opportunities, others simply expressed admiration. A few doubters emerged, of course, questioning Ebony's motives or insinuating that she was just a token success story. But Ebony had learned long ago that negativity was inevitable when pioneering new paths. "You can't please everyone," Ebony said, half to herself, half to Jay. "You don't have to," he replied. "You just need to stay true to the mission." Ebony nodded, reminded of her mother's words, "Don't let them change you." She was determined to keep her integrity, her humility, and her community focus intact. The path ahead was sure to be cluttered with more challenges, but Ebony White was used to forging ahead through adversity. Rising from their booth, Ebony and Jay decided it was time to head out. They had 1,000 tasks to tackle, from press releases to pilot interviews. Ebony left cash for the bill and added a hefty tip. Old habits of generosity her parents instilled in her. As they stepped onto the bustling street, Ebony felt the crisp air energize her. She owned a Gulfstream G600 now, a testament to what was possible when one refused to be confined by others' narrow expectations. The next chapter of her life had begun. A week later, Ebony found herself embroiled in the rapid expansion of Skyrise Cirrus. The news of her G600 purchase had spread, prompting a surge of inquiries, both from potential clients intrigued by her story and from media outlets eager for an interview. Ebony spent her days bouncing between investor calls, staff hiring, and philanthropic planning sessions. Yet in the midst of her whirlwind schedule, she received an unexpected email that made her heart skip a beat. The subject line read, "Urgent matter, Randall Moore." Curiosity piqued. Ebony opened the message to find it was from a senior legal counsel at the brokerage firm Randall worked for. The email was cordial but formal, requesting a meeting at her earliest convenience to discuss recent developments. Sensing potential trouble, Ebony forwarded the email to Jay. After a flurry of texts and phone calls, they decided Ebony would meet with the counsel in person, accompanied by their own legal representative. The meeting took place at an imposing downtown office tower. Ebony arrived wearing a confident expression, determined not to let anxiety consume her. In a sleek conference room with glass walls overlooking the city skyline, Ebony and Jay sat opposite a woman in her 40s, Naomi Sanders, the legal counsel whose demeanor radiated professionalism. With a courteous greeting, Naomi launched into the matter. "Miss White, thank you for meeting with me. I'll cut straight to the chase. We've recently become aware of some disturbing allegations involving Randall Moore. It seems he may have engaged in questionable practices and possibly violated company policy by discouraging or undermining certain clients due to personal bias. We're investigating the extent of these actions." Ebony's stomach clenched. She recalled how Randall had tried to sabotage her purchase by courting the Harrisons. "I can attest to that," Ebony said calmly, glancing at Jay for reassurance. "I experienced blatant discrimination during the deal for the Gulfstream G600. Naomi nodded gravely. "Yes, that's one of the cases under review. Based on multiple complaints, it seems Mr. Moore systematically steered high-value assets away from clients he deemed unsuitable. We suspect his motives were racially biased in several instances. This is a major liability issue, and the firm wants to make amends." Ebony let out a slow breath, momentarily transported back to the humiliating scene at the FBO. "I appreciate the firm addressing this," she said, "but what does this have to do with me specifically?" Naomi folded her hands, choosing her words carefully. "Our leadership is exploring restitution options. Beyond an apology, we're considering ways to support the clients like yourself who were negatively impacted by Mr. Moore's behavior. That could include partial refunds of brokerage fees, coverage of legal expenses, or other measures to show goodwill. Ebony arched an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "Also," Naomi continued, "the firm is prepared to terminate Randall Moore's employment. He's been suspended pending the investigation's outcome, but based on what we've uncovered, it's unlikely he'll remain with us." A flicker of justice passed through Ebony's mind. She had no personal desire for vengeance, yet she couldn't deny feeling a certain sense of hard karma. Randall's downfall was a byproduct of his own prejudice and unethical actions. It seemed the corporate world had little tolerance for the liability he posed. "Thank you for taking this seriously," Ebony said. "I won't deny Mr. Moore's conduct was highly unprofessional and discriminatory. As for restitution, I'm open to discussing specifics with my legal team." Naomi nodded, relieved at Ebony's measured response. "We're aiming for an equitable resolution. If you'd like to present any evidence, emails, messages, statements, we'll add it to our investigation. We want to be thorough." Ebony thought back to the excruciating meeting in the lounge. Although she didn't have direct evidence of Randall's whispered remarks, the overall pattern was plain. She agreed to share any relevant documentation from her email exchanges and recorded calls that might illuminate Randall's bias. As Ebony and Jay left the office, a sense of closure settled over her, interwoven with a pang of empathy for the countless other clients who'd likely been sidelined by Randall. She texted her mother, updating her on the surprising turn of events. Regina responded almost instantly, "Proud of you for standing tall. Karma always finds a way." The following day, Ebony's phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Her breath caught when she realized it was from Randall Moore himself. It read, "Miss White, I'd like to speak with you. If you have a moment about the investigation, please call." Ebony's initial instinct was to ignore the text. She owed Randall nothing, but curiosity nagged at her, so she decided to hear him out. She dialed the number, and Randall picked up on the second ring. His voice was subdued, a stark contrast from the oily confidence he'd displayed at the FBO. "Miss White, thanks for calling. The firm is letting me go. They say I mishandled several client transactions, including yours." Ebony stared out her office window, feeling an odd mixture of pity and indignation. "I heard," she replied evenly. "They're also looking into restitution." Randall sighed, a tired, broken sound. I want to apologize, not because I'm forced to, but because I realize now how my biases impacted my judgment. I was wrong to assume you weren't a serious buyer. You'd think in this day and age I'd know better." Ebony pressed her lips together. She had waited for an apology, but now that it was here, it felt strangely hollow. Sometimes you don't truly see the consequences of your actions until it's too late. "Mr. Moore," his voice cracked slightly, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you'll accept my apology. I'm working on myself. I can't change the past, but I can try to be different going forward." Ebony inhaled slowly. "I appreciate the acknowledgement. Ultimately, what matters is how you conduct yourself from now on. I'll leave it at that." With that, Ebony ended the call. A swirl of conflicting emotions churned in her stomach, relief that justice had been served, empathy for a fellow human being facing consequences, and steadfast determination to push forward. In the end, Ebony recognized this entire saga was more than just personal. It symbolized the broader fight for representation and equality. Weeks passed. Ebony's newly acquired Gulfstream G100 underwent a thorough customization process to reflect Skyrise Cirrus brand ethos. She replaced some of the traditional, opulent finishes with more sustainable materials and installed advanced avionics that lowered the aircraft's carbon footprint. She commissioned a local artist from Chicago and up-and-coming creative named Aliyah Sterling to design a mural like decal on the tail, capturing a vibrant fusion of urban landscapes and serene skies. In Ebony's mind, it was a visual testament to her journey from humble beginnings to boundless flight. Inaugural flight day arrived, marking the official launch of Skyrise Cirrus's expanded services. The plan was to fly from Washington, D.C. to Chicago, Ebony's hometown, symbolizing the bridging of her past and future. In a nod to her philanthropic passions, Ebony decided the maiden voyage would carry a group of charitable partners who worked on educational programs for underprivileged children. It would not only celebrate Ebony's success but also champion a cause dear to her heart. News cameras and local journalists assembled at Dulles Airport, eager to capture the takeoff. As Ebony and her team approached the G600, applause broke out from a small crowd of supporters, interns, and friends. Ebony wore a fitted navy dress, her hair styled in an elegant twist. She took a moment to greet each member of the philanthropic delegation, thanking them for their devotion to uplifting communities. Before boarding, Ebony stepped up to a small podium set up by the tarmac. Microphones from local channels and a few national outlets pointed her way. She cleared her throat and began, "Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to stand here on the cusp of something I've dreamed about for years. When I founded Skyrise Cirrus, my vision was to show the world that private aviation can serve more than just the elite. It can be a platform for innovation, philanthropy, and inclusivity. Today's inaugural flight embodies that vision. We're carrying non-profit leaders who help children find hope and opportunity through education. I want to thank our investors, my dedicated team, and all of you for believing in our mission. Together, we're rewriting the narrative of who can take to the skies and why." The crowd responded with warm applause. Cameras clicked and whirred, capturing Ebony's poised figure against the backdrop of the streamlined jet. Even from a distance, the tailed decal shimmered in the sunlight, a beacon of color and community spirit. A flight attendant then led Ebony and her guests on board. The interior bore Ebony's signature touches: responsibly sourced leather, soft LED lighting, and subtle but impactful design elements that represented the synergy between luxury and social responsibility. The philanthropic delegates seemed in awe, taking in every detail. A middle-aged educator from Chicago's South Side beamed at Ebony, praising the comfort and efficiency that would make cross-country collaborations more feasible. Moments later, Ebony settled into the cabin's lounge area, glancing around at the excited faces. This was a far cry from the hushed, hostile atmosphere she'd faced at the FBO weeks earlier. In its place was celebration, solidarity, and the unspoken knowledge that the gatekeepers hadn't been able to lock her out. One of the philanthropic partners approached Ebony, a tall woman named Dr. Angela Green. "Ebony," she said softly, "I remember you volunteering at my community center when you were just a teenager. You always had that spark. Even then, you talked about big dreams, changing the world. Seeing you now, it's extraordinary." Ebony felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, momentarily overwhelmed by gratitude. "Doctor." Green pulled her into a quick embrace before letting Ebony mingle with the others. Soon the pilot's voice rang out over the intercom. "Good morning, Skyrise Cirrus. This is Captain Dalton. We're cleared for takeoff. Please take your seats and fasten your seatbelts as we prepare to taxi." Ebony slid into a plush seat near a window, still marveling at the reality that she owned this plane. Outside, camera crews continued filming. The engines hummed to life, a smooth vibration that reverberated through the cabin. As the jet rolled to the runway, Ebony felt her heart flutter. This was more than just a trip home. It was a flight toward the future she dared to imagine. With a steady roar, the plane accelerated down the runway, pressing Ebony back against her seat. In a matter of seconds, they were airborne, lifting into a brilliant blue sky. Cheers erupted from the cabin. Dr. Green leaned across the aisle, exclaiming, "You did it, Ebony! We're flying!" Ebony laughed, her entire being suffused with awe. "Yes, we are," she said, gazing out the window at the receding landscape below. The farmland and highways shrank, replaced by a sweeping horizon that seemed limitless. If Ebony had learned anything, it was that the sky, much like opportunity, was too vast to be monopolized by any one group. As they climbed to cruising altitude, Ebony reflected on the improbable path that led her here, the naysayers, the prejudice, the quiet nights spent perfecting pitch decks, the unwavering support of her family and friends. She remembered the piercing statement, "Private jets aren't for you," and how quickly it had become obsolete. She refused to live by someone else's narrow definition of who belonged where. In the months that followed, Skyrise Cirrus would grow, adding more aircraft to its fleet and forging relationships with like-minded organizations. Ebony would speak at conferences about social entrepreneurship, bridging the gap between luxury and altruism. She would sponsor aviation scholarships for underrepresented communities, determined to pave the runway for future Ebony's dreaming of flight. And whenever she encountered skepticism or ignorance, she would recall that day at the FBO, the hush that fell when she announced herself as the new owner of the Gulfstream G600, and the unassailable truth that soared in the silence. She belonged, and so did countless others. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster of drama, triumph, and well-deserved justice. Ebony's journey shows that hard work, conviction, and resilience can smash even the toughest barriers. Next time someone tells you that's not for you, remember Ebony White's unwavering courage and how she turned doubt into destiny. If this story moved you, sparked your ambition, or reminded you of your own dreams waiting to take flight, we'd love your support. Give this video a like, share it with anyone who needs a dose of inspiration, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more uplifting stories. Together, let's keep shattering limits, shining a light on real-life triumphs, and proving that our backgrounds don't define us, our vision and perseverance do. Your story matters, write it boldly and let it soar.